Good evening. Welcome to the community meeting for the Cameron Peak Fire for October 26th. Today, the Cameron Peak Fire is 208,663 acres and 64% contained. The Thompson Zone is 4,346 acres with no containment. This will be the last day for the Rocky Mountain Type 1 team. We'll be transferring command to the Pacific Northwest Type 1 Team 2 tomorrow. More on that to come. I have a full agenda for you tonight. We'll start with our incident meteorologist, Dan Bird, move to our fire behavior analyst, Glenn Lewis, Operation Section Chief Joe Sean Kennedy. We'll hear from Sheriff Justin Smith, Canyon Lakes District Ranger Katie Donahue, updates from Estes Park and Poudre Valley Rural Electric Association, and then we'll hear from Incident Commander Dan Dallas. So with that, I'll turn it over to Incident Meteorologist Dan Bird.
All right, good evening, everyone. So just to kind of recap what happened the past day and a half or so, had quite a bit of snowfall up on the higher elevations, generally 15 to 20 inches up in the higher elevations, Estes Park to Red Feather. There were some areas that saw more than that over there, some areas that saw less than that, but just on average. In lighter amounts as you get further to the east, down in Loveland in this region here, they had about 7 to 11 inches. And once again, there were some isolated locations with more, some with less. And going forward, we're going to have some pretty cold conditions over the fire, at least for the next day or so. Lows tonight are going to be, some areas are going to see below zero readings. But overall, temperatures are going to be generally in the single digits, with some areas, like I say, with below zero readings. As we progress through tomorrow, temperatures are going to warm up. Tomorrow, skies are going to be pretty clear with a few clouds. Temperatures are actually going to warm up into the mid-30s across the fire. You may see 40 degrees in some of the lower elevations. Pretty light winds across the fire tomorrow. And then going forward through the rest of the week, it looks like we'll see upper-level ridging will build in across the region, although the winds will pick up a little bit out of the northeast on Wednesday as the upper-level low moves along to our south. But by Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the ridge is going to strengthen a little bit over the fire each day. Temperatures are going to warm generally into the 50s across the fire. Down on lower elevations, could see temperatures close to 60 as we get into the weekend. And there's some potential for some gusty winds on Saturday as a cold front moves across the region, but it's going to be dry with no precip associated with it, just mainly going to pick up the winds a little bit for the weekend. And it looks dry as we're going into next week. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dan. Next up is Fire Behavior Analyst Glenn Lewis.
Good evening. Glenn Lewis, Fire Behavior Analyst with Rocky Mountain Team 1. So obviously, we got a bunch of snow on the fire, and that's a very positive development. So long as the snow is there, basically the fire has stopped all real spread, as long as that snow remains there. But it's important to remember that this is not, that snow, even with the moisture that's in it and that it's out there, it's not a fire-ending or a season-ending event. And so what happens is that the fire is basically halted from any real movement because of the snow's property. But as it begins to warm up and the snow begins to melt, then that moisture becomes available, and it's really important if it warms up too quickly, if we get that warm, dry, windy weather where the snow melts really rapidly, then the moisture basically is just like a thunderstorm that comes through and dumps moisture out, but it runs off and it's not available to soak into the fuels. And that's exacerbated by the fact that if you get those dry, windy days, that the evaporation happens very quickly, and that the fuels aren't able to absorb that. So it's really important to keep that in mind as we go forward. In order for it the fire to really go out, it's going to need a bunch more moisture on it. It's going to need to stay cold for an extended period of time, and that moisture needs some time to really soak into the fuels out there. But for now, for an extended period here before it warms up and melts the snow off, really anticipate very, very little fire movement and very little fire activity. Just see some smoke in the air from time to time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Glenn. Next up, we have Operations Section Chief Joe Sean Kennedy.
Good evening. I do believe the last update Paul gave you was on Friday evening, and we've had a lot of different things that happened since Friday. The past 2 days, we have stayed, had all the crews stay down off the hill due to safety and risk management. We didn't want to expose anybody to the treacherous roads, but I would like to take a quick step back and take a look at what we've done since Friday. Up in between Highway 14 to Highway 14, everything on the north end is still in patrol and monitor status. Everything has been staying within the control and containment lines. No issues. On Saturday morning, they did open Highway 14. So Highway 14 now is open. Moving down to the south end here and to the east, everything has been staying into the containment lines. No issue. Once we get down into the Buckhorn Road, we did do a little bit of a burnout on Saturday. Still looking pretty good in there all the way along the Buckhorn Road. No issues. Everything's still within the containment and control lines. Moving over to the Highway County Road 27 corridor, everything is looking really good. Everything has been held within the containment and control lines. One update that we did have is we have line and containment all the way around the spot fire from last Saturday in Division Union. Moving around, going down to the Cedar Park, everything is really good. We were able to go direct with hand crews and dozers all the way to the west towards Storm Mountain. Continuing to go to the west towards Glen Haven, the fire on Saturday morning definitely did wake up right below the North Fork Trail. We did have to pull crews out for a short period and reassess and then re-engage. It's still a couple miles from Glen Haven. No known structures lost. A very good active Saturday afternoon, but no issues there as of right now with the snow. Moving down into Division Whiskey and Estes Park and into Rocky Mountain National Park. Very active on Saturday morning. We did have 2 fingers go towards from the west to the east. We were able to hold it on the Fawn Lake Road, and we did some defensive firing on this corner right here, this northwest or northeast corner. Really were successful by utilizing the Park Service fuel treatment areas. That really helped us out. We were able to, with no issue, go in there and do some defensive firing. One other area with concern on Saturday morning, we did get a small column coming up at Pingree by CSU. We were doing structure defense and point protection in there. No known structure issues, no known losses. But now with the snow, everything's been looking good. Thank you.
Thanks, Joshan. Next up, we have Sheriff Justin Smith.
Thank you. Just want to point out at this point, as we roll into tomorrow, this counting the Nemo that's been here will be our 7th overhead team coming in to help manage the fire, and certainly appreciate the work of Dan's team and everything that they've done for us. It's been a pretty long haul. They came in at a very difficult time and have really stepped up to help on this fire. What I want to talk a little bit about is what we're doing to repopulate areas and the areas that are still closed off for us. First, let me start out on the original Cameron Peak fire, some areas that we continue to get questions about. Starting at the top, as was mentioned, Highway 14 is completely open now, so we're able to get folks back up through there. There are some areas, if you go look at the evacuation map on the county website, that show closed. It looks like off Highway 14. It's actually back in the Comanche Wilderness area here, and then where Crown Point comes out. It shows as a closed area, but there's minimal structures, mostly just Forest Service land in there. We do still have the Pingree Park Road closed, and the reason for that, as was mentioned, was while most of it's shut off on this side for the fire, there was still activity back in the Pingree Park campus area, and we know there was also down here on the Bulwark Ridge, and I believe there were a couple other areas that were active in the last couple of days. So there's enough green in the middle of there for us to repopulate people in those areas, puts them in an area that may be contained, but still may have active fire, and was mentioned We certainly know from Labor Day and from the most recent snow that, as was mentioned by our fire behavior analyst, that it can pick up quickly. So we don't want to get complacent, so we haven't been able to open that, nor have we been able to open 44H. I think we're getting closer there. But 44H in the Crystal Mountain area, again, still has active fire in there. You wouldn't know it to see the snow right now, but we do know that pops up. We've seen that several times before. We did get Stove Prairie Road all the way to Highway 14 opened up last weekend, so full repopulation there. Obviously, all the Risk Canyon. We were good inside of the spot over here, so we've repopulated Otter Road and the Redstone Canyon. One area that was brought to our attention today that has cleared up is the east side of Lower Buckhorn or County Road 27. So we were able late this afternoon to put an opening on that. While fire was near, there's no chance, no real threat of fire crossing the road into that grassy area. So we're able to get folks back into those areas with a downgrade. The area that we're still a little pressed on, working with the team, has been the west side of County Road 27. And the reason for that is not so much active fire at that front as we're running into continually falling trees and some hazards. And so I know they've retasked crews to get into that area. And trust me, I'm talking to my staff every day, pushing on each one of these areas. You know, where can we go with getting it open? That one is certainly closer. If 44H stays okay in that area, we're going to visit that again tomorrow. That Pingree Park Road is still going to be a challenge. As we move back around, Highway 14 corridor opened up last weekend at the end of the weekend. However, the County Road 43 from Storm Mountain to Drake is still closed. Let me start with Storm Mountain. One of the challenges, and they've made tremendous advancements in the work up there, has been the road now. As a former Storm Mountain resident from about 30 years ago, I have too much experience with that and know how bad that road gets. And I know we've had at least one fire truck that slipped off the road and blocked for a while. We've had other vehicles that came up there and got stuck. So we're working on that challenge with the road. If you live up there, you understand road conditions, but we are working between fire activity and road conditions to work to make sure we get that open. Still continue to be concerned for residents in that Glen Haven area. And again, as was mentioned, the fire certainly has laid down with the snow, but we know from Saturday we had active spotting in a couple areas east and west of the main fire behind the retreat. While it didn't get to any structures, we do know there was new fire up in there. So we continue to be concerned, but again, we continue to revisit the opportunity to open that area a little bit more. As we move around to Estes Park, yesterday we were able to get both Highway 7 and Highway 36 out south of Estes, and you can look at the specifics on the map. We were able to get that open all the way to the county line. We've coordinated with Boulder County as well to try to be consistent on those. And from there, we got pretty much about 2/3 or 3/4 of Estes over to the east opened up, minus the Glen Haven area, because they were confident we were good there. Obviously, the snow, while there's fire nearby, gives certainly a reasonable protection. The areas we have not quite opened yet that stay in mandatory are going out Fall River Road, over here, Fall River Road, and then that area around Mary's Lake and Spur 66. We have fire less than a half a mile from the YMCA camp, around a mile or less, from the Beaver Meadows entrance. And if you looked at the close maps, you've seen how close to the entrance it came. So with that, we will reevaluate again tomorrow as the new team comes in, have them look at the fire behavior, see where things are at, see if there's the ability to loosen up on any of those. But that's where we are on all those evacuations. One of the things I also want to wrap up with is, while we have maintained those evacuation zones, knowing this weather was coming in over the weekend, as I told you on Friday, I gave my staff the direction that we were going to do everything we possibly could to get to yes when it came to giving you at least the opportunity to get back into these areas and winterize your homes that were back in those impacted areas. And I apologize. I know I've heard from some folks that some of those lines were long, but I can tell you it worked all the way throughout the day, and we're continuing to work on that to get folks back. Some of those areas are still dicey enough that we do escorts back in to make sure it's safe, make sure you get back out. We don't want to put you back there to do that and have something happen and not realize that you didn't get back out. So we are continuing with that. And with that, I had one citizen bring up a real frustration that they had not yet been notified of their structure loss back in the Crystal Mountain area. And they only found out because another neighbor had gotten back to winterize, saw their home and told them. And you have my apology. That's one of those, we are absolutely overwhelmed. We didn't want it to happen that way. We were stuck with that decision. Do we hold folks out from winterizing just to save that from happening? And I'll take all the responsibility for that call. It was important to get you back there if we could to get that. I'm sorry that anybody may have gotten news from a third party. I know the assessment teams were delayed by this weather a little bit as well. I know they've done a tremendous job. And again, if you'll go to the county website, I don't have a good number on those structures. There's been new numbers coming in. One of the challenges that they've run into is for some of those, looking at the assessment records, they might have a name, but they don't have a phone number. They're having difficulty getting a hold of you quickly. So if you have a property back in there, you can call and check. Call our Joint Information Center, and they will put you in touch with the assessment teams if you haven't been notified. And I would rather duplicate the effort than miss out and get you that information. So that's where we're at right now. We continue to work with the town of Estes Park. We work with the Boulder County officials. And let me just add that I certainly back up this assessment that, the natural part of me says we have this snow, we're good to go. We saw this on this fire earlier when 14 inches did not stop it. They gave us a delay. And for everybody that lives in Estes Park, has been there since 2012, you have to remember when the Fern Lake fire, which started in September of 12, set clear up in the Forest Canyon area for months and finally came down in November in very cold weather with a wind push, came shooting back down. And we certainly understand, as much as we'd like to deny it, that potential is there. So we understand, well, it feels like we should get everybody back in immediately. There's still some more that needs to be done in assessment. And then the last thing that I'm going to point to is I've seen Sprague Pass where that fire came through over the weekend and came into the Estes area. And I've also seen the maps of where that fire still is around Grand Lake. And we're certainly not out of the woods for the potential for that fire with the right push to push back on the Continental Divide again. By all logic, it shouldn't come over, but it shouldn't have come over before. So we do continue to keep an eye on that and certainly hope and pray that it doesn't come back on the further south area or hook up on the north. But we know that potential's there. We'll keep working with you, keep communicating. Feel free to call our Joint Information Center. They'll answer your questions as best they can or put you in touch with folks. Again, we're all tired, we're frustrated. It's pushing 80 days here pretty soon. Folks have been very patient, but we understand your concern and know that we're going to work with you as much as you can. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. Next up is Canyon Lakes District Ranger Katie Donahue.
Good evening. My name's Katie Donahue. I'm the Canyon Lakes District Ranger. And I want to echo some of the stuff that Justin just brought up. We really would like to get folks back into the forest as soon as possible. And I know with the snow, it absolutely feels like it should be that way. And I know that a lot of folks got themselves out into the forest this weekend. But I want to remind you that we do have a closure in place. We expanded that closure pretty greatly last week when things were really starting to blow up on the East Troublesome fire. And we have not lifted it yet. We're looking at it every day. Things are starting to calm down with the weather, and I know that we do have a lot of containment up on the north side of the fire. So I think you can expect to see some changes to those closures soon, but they have not happened yet. So over the weekend, CDOT opened Highway 14, and as Red Feather Lakes has also been repopulated, I know that we've got folks traveling up Pooter Canyon and also up towards the Dead Man area. And I know that a lot of folks have gotten out onto forest. Hopefully you've encountered someone and they've given you some education out in the field. But what I'd really like is for people to take a look at the closures online before they leave. You can find them here on this Facebook page. You can also link to them from the INSEE website for the fire, as well as the forest website has all the current closure information. It's super critical that you guys look at that. We don't want anyone to get cited, and we also really don't want anyone to get hurt. And that's primarily the main focus of our closures. I know that as some of the areas quiet down, it seems harder and harder to understand what the safety issues are. But we have a lot of things out in the woods and dozer lines and things like that and hazard trees that may have been actually created because of suppression efforts, whether the fire got there or not. We also still have crews in the area, and then we have a lot of places that have burned. So wandering in and among trees in a burned area, especially one that hasn't been assessed yet, or some of the trees cut down, can be super, super dangerous. So we absolutely ask you guys to stay out of the woods until we give you the green light to get in there, and just ask for your patience. We know it's been quite a long time. Finally, before I step away, I just want to thank Dan Dallas and Rocky Mountain Team 1 for their awesome work over the last couple of weeks. We've had a couple of huge wind events. They had an unexpected fire thrown at them. They've really, really handled that very, very well. And we also want to welcome Pacific Northwest Team 2 and Rob Allen and his team, because they're going to come in. And we've been telling them they're coming into a snowstorm, but we think there's still some fire active under there. So we wish them all good support, and I know that they're going to get good support from the community. So thanks. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Katie. I have a couple updates that I'll read. The first is from the town of Estes Park. Due to the continued wildfire evacuation orders in the Estes Valley, both mandatory and voluntary, officials must prohibit visitation for recreation and leisure purposes. Access for community members must be prioritized at this time, and the community will maintain a focus on supporting the firefighters, law enforcement, and other emergency responders who are there to support them. Access to the area is under restrictions. Rocky Mountain National Park is closed, as well as the national forests in the area. The town looks forward to the time evacuation orders can be lifted and they can begin to welcome guests back to the valley. Residents, local business employees, and service providers should be able to access Estes Park via state highways. We recommend having some material that indicates your residence or employment in the valley available as you travel. Estes Park Power and Communications restored electric service to all the Estes Valley except for Moraine Park and portions in the northern part of the retreat where there was fire damage to the infrastructure. Plows continue to work on the roads throughout Estes Valley. The town of Estes sends its sincere appreciation to all of the members of the incident management team, firefighters, law enforcement personnel, utility personnel, plow drivers, and other support services working to keep our community safe. Local updates are available on the town's Facebook page and at estes.org/emergency. So thank you to the town of Estes for that update. I have a quick update from Poudre Valley Rural Electric Association. And their update is crews have made great progress completing lines along Highway 14 and restoring power to Pingree Park and Cedar Park late last week. Now line crews will start rebuilding in Buckskin Heights tomorrow, as well as continuing efforts in Monument Gulch. So thanks to Poudre Valley Rural Electric Association for that update. And I'll turn it over to Incident Commander Dan Dallas.
All right, thank you, Dave. So when you get towards the end, as was mentioned, this will be our last meeting with you folks, and you'll have a new team here, and I'll make some introductions here in a second. But sometimes it seems like you've been here a long, long time, and on these things, because things are happening so fast. And so wanted to give a big shout out to when you live in a hotel like we've been doing. Some of my closest neighbors now are a few doors down, and got to know some of them. So big shout out to some of the evacuees I've met and had some great discussions with. So my friends from Storm Mountain, from Cedar Park, the retreat, from Masonville, big shout out to you. And then that leads into what I wanted to talk about. Yes, as I've shared with you before, we are working directly for the Forest Service. We are working directly for the Larimer County. We're working with the DFPC and working with the National Park Service. So that is who I've got a delegation of authority for. But what the point I wanted to make as we talked and met many people along the way, but in particular, just kind of almost got in the habit with visiting some of these folks every night, was we've been here working for you. We work in service to you. I hope we've done the best job we can. I know it's not, some of you, well, all of you have been incredibly disrupted, including everybody I work for here who I mentioned, and then all the folks that had to evacuate. Hopefully my friends in Masonville, they made it back in, that sort of thing. So in the end, we're working for you. We're trying to get things back to semi-normal, and looking forward to the day when I know we didn't quite get there, but we had some unusual circumstances that kind of kept us from getting you there. So with that, I know the next team in, that probably will all happen. And so I'd like to introduce Rob. Where are you? There you are. Rob Allen is your new incident commander, and he's brought his team with him. I know many of them, known Rob for a long time. I've known his deputy for a long time. And I'll just leave you with, you're in good hands.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. Dan's crew's done us a great job getting us here. We're not getting a very warm welcome from Mother Nature, but we certainly have gotten a warm welcome from the team that's here now, from the county, from the Sheriff's Department, from the Forest and the Park Service. So we're hoping to step right in and work closely with them, working with the Sheriff's Department to get those places cleaned up and secured so we can get you back into your homes, working with the park and with the forest to get those areas cleaned up and some of those dozer lines squared away, some of the repair work done so we can get you back into the woods and back into the forest where you want to be. Coming from the Pacific Northwest, we've had our share of big fires this year also, knowing the urgency to try to get things back around to being back to normal as much as we can is what we're here to do. We're here to work for you and keep our firefighters safe and do as much as we can. So, Dan, appreciate your good handoff here, giving us good information, and we'll look forward to talking to you all and working with this community soon.
Thanks, Rob. We'll get Dan back up there. We got a few questions for him.
This is always the best part, Dave.
So the first question is, some people said it seems like teams are moving through pretty quickly. So how does that rotation work, and why are teams moving through every few weeks?
Couple different things, but the normal assignment for a team is 14 days. We can extend to 21, and there's a whole bunch of things behind it, but in the end, it has to do with just kind of the grind of one of these. You're constantly busy. They all have a job to do. They're constantly busy, and it's just after a certain amount of time, and like I said, there's some science behind it that has measured this stuff. You become less and less effective. It's kind of, when you do the same thing over and over again, you just become less effective, especially when there's intensity, there's urgency, and there's difficulty, and your mind's constantly running. So they've kind of determined, they've determined that a standard thing is basically 2 weeks, a standard run. We can't extend to 21 and that sort of thing. But in this case, it was a 14-day assignment for us.
Okay.
And this is our, you help me out, 4th or 5th, Brenda? This is our fourth fire this year. This is the first one that we've done just 14. We extended on all the rest of them.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And then just some questions about, have you been flying aircraft, or, now that the fire's, it's quiet, so why aren't we up there putting it out?
A couple different things. One of the unique circumstances on this fire was we just weren't able to fly every day. And that happens, I'll say, in a 14-day assignment, that maybe 1 or 2 days, usually because of smoke or inversion, that sort of thing. It's been unusual here because I think there was probably more days we couldn't fly than we could because of strong wind mainly. If it gets above around 30 miles an hour on the ground, it's usually much more, not very far off the surface of the earth, and it's too much for the aircraft. It's beyond their capability to go through that safely. So we did fly. Are they? And the other part of the question that at least I perceived is why haven't we done that lately? The ceiling, what they call the ceiling's been too low. I know the day Friday when it took the big run on us, that morning there was frost. Everything was white. There was just frost everywhere, and it was basically a weather event where it came in. It was moist. Clouds came in, covered the mountain. Everything froze. All that kind of stuff. And there's been many days where we start out with, and you're used to it here if you lived here, is the folks that live up on the mountain, it's foggy. The folks that live down here, going out into the plains, you can't see the mountain. So those sorts of events have limited our ability to fly.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I think that the second part of that question was, so now that the fire activities died down because of the weather, so why aren't we up there right now, these last 2 days?
Oh, I see. Well, the main thing was, of course, yesterday it snowed a good part of the day, and so on the roads it was kind of bad enough. We didn't want it to add. I know the sheriff's office and state patrol, there was a number of wrecks. The right out here on the freeway at our exit right here at Crossroads, the freeway was closed. So we just don't want to add to that. Our folks would be, the driving's terrible, and for others too. So, when we put 1,841 people out on the roads, it just adds to the misery that the sheriff's office and state patrol are having. That's number one. And then number two, the extreme cold just really hampers efficiency. Putting people out there, they might be able to work for an hour or so, and then they're going to have to go somewhere and get warm and all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, a lot of the work that we're doing right now is what we call kind of mop up and making sure the perimeter goes. That's water intensive, comes out of engines and stuff like that. And it literally freezes. And then we have all kinds of difficulty with our equipment. They freeze up and causes a lot of damage. So in the long run, in the short run and in the long run, it's better to not put people out under those conditions until they moderate some.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, those are the questions for you, so we'll get the sheriff up next.
All right, very good.
So the first one I mentioned in that update from the town of Estes that that if you're going up there because you live there or you work there, it might be good to have some documentation. So what sorts of things would they be looking at?
Very good question. So if you're headed up that way, in the perfect world, we'd like to have people with credentials. That's not practical and appropriate or reasonable as far as the fire credentials that we were issuing early on when we had small areas. We're going to work with you a lot. Things like your driver's license and registration. Obviously, if you register up there, if you've otherwise got property up there, anything with an address on it, and also if you work up there, we realize we're going to have to kind of work with you on that. So just know that it makes it faster if you have those type of credentials. If you don't, we're going to work with you. And the other one that we understand is that there's a lot of folks that run supply routes up there that are going to be bringing things to the town. So I would say if you have something, driver's license, registration, something from your home or business that shows the address, that'll move it faster. If you don't, we'll work with you. We realize we're not going to keep people out that need to get there that we can reasonably have a reason to be there. And again, it's just the encouragement that folks that simply want to go up and take a look at it, now's not the time. First of all, we're trying to get the residents repopulated, kind of get their feet back under them. And the other is there's still a tremendous amount of fire traffic up there. And even without these snowy, icy conditions, that's difficult. We certainly don't want to add on top of that. So it shouldn't take too long, but we do hope to keep things kind of quiet as they get things rolling again.
Okay. Thank you. And can you tell us about County Road 43 between Drake and Glen Haven? How's
Yes,
that?
County Road 43 still remains closed at this time as we talked about the fire activity that's still up in the retreat area. So that's still a mandatory evacuation zone. However, with that said, we're still working with local residents that need to get back to their property to do something, to get something, to continue to work on winterization, et cetera. We want to minimize that traffic again because we have fire personnel in and out. And again, the roads have become certainly a bit treacherous. But if you come up and you've got property or home back there, if it's not right in where the fire is, we're going to do everything we can to get you back on the short term. It's not to be repopulated yet. Or even if it's in a more challenging area, if we can, we may end up doing escorts. And I will add up on Storm Mountain, I'm going to continue to talk to my staff as conditions change up there. I know it's gotten a lot better for residents. At this point, the real challenge is that road. And I realize you may have a vehicle that's perfectly good with going up there. We've got some other things stuck. When that fire truck went off, it got dicey. I don't know if these fire engines from around the country all bring chains with them when they come here for a fight fire. But yeah, that's kind of the challenge we have. But we're working on it every day, and we'll look at it again tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And then just remind folks, so we do have, you know, there's some just specific questions in there. Someone maybe doesn't understand exactly where evacuation zone is, or so where should they go?
Great. I know there's some specific questions about your specific area. What I'm going to ask you to do is call our Joint Information Center. It's open, I believe, 8 to 5. If you go to the larimer.org website, click at the top left corner for the Cameron Peak Fire, and you'll scroll down. First of all, it can show you the evacuation zones. If you want to see the message, the most recent message on that area, click on that on your section, and it'll pull that message up. There also should be a listing for the Joint Information Center number, and I'm pretty sure I'd quote it wrong if I gave it to you off the top of my head. But if you'll call in there, we've got staff in there to answer those very specific questions.
Great, and we can post that in the Facebook chat so people can see it. So yeah, thank you, Sheriff. Just a couple questions for Ranger Donahue. And so you mentioned just people that are violating the closures and are in there might encounter people, but there's some concerns from people that support the closure and want to know what kind of enforcement is going on up there.
So there's quite a bit of enforcement. So there's roadblocks in the area, and those should be a surefire sign that you shouldn't drive any further. Sometimes they have personnel with them, sometimes they don't. This fire is huge, and it is very difficult for us to keep staffing at every single roadblock. We also have some forest roads open that are not truly available to the public. The gates are swung open, and that's one of the things that we're seeing. We need them open for fire traffic, and sometimes for safety, like things like Long Draw Road, for example. If you're coming down Long Draw, it's very difficult to stop. Typically, when we have snow on it, that road's not open. So right now it is open because we need it open for fire traffic, and we need to leave that gate open so that the firefighters don't slam into it as they're coming down the hill. So that means that people really need to come in with that understanding about what's open and what's closed so they don't make the wrong choice and head up roads that shouldn't be open. There is law enforcement out there, however. We have a number of folks detailed onto the forest. So if you think you're going to drive up and assume that because you don't often see law enforcement up there, there isn't any, I would not make that assumption right now. We've got a lot of extra officers here because of the fire. And then we also, any fire personnel or district staff may also stop and talk to folks. So there's quite a bit of personnel out there keeping an eye on things. We'd really, really prefer that you not get yourself into the situation where there's a citation. Even if you're not with your car, if it's parked at a trailhead, those trailheads are closed, we will send you a ticket to your home. So there are definitely a lot of folks out there. There is some signage, but there are opportunities for folks to get onto forest roads that are closed but may appear to be open just because we need them open for safety. So it's not totally cut and dry on the ground. That's why we really want you guys to look at it before you go.
Okay, thank you. And a couple other questions. So looking forward, there's concern about trails. We'll have, down trees in some of the roads will. And so are there opportunities for people to volunteer to help clear those when the time comes?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've actually done quite a few assessments kind of from the The initial area of the fire, our burned area emergency rehab team, BEAR team, has gotten out and looked at a lot of our trail conditions, so we have some idea of some of the work that's ahead of us. There's going to be a lot of hazard tree cutting in our future for a long time to come. Also, some projects involving things like trail bridge removal, because if there's some high flows coming up in the springtime when we have runoff, we want to protect them from the extra runoff that we're expecting next year. So there definitely are going to be some opportunities. We have clubs that we work with. I'm pretty sure I've been scanning the comments during the meeting, so I know some of those have already been posted. But Poudre Wilderness volunteers, Wilderness Restoration volunteers, there's a couple of four-wheel drive clubs in the area. We're going to be working with all of those folks to do trail work, trail restoration, and there's going to be lots of rehab work in our rec facilities, and also just patrolling as well coming up.
Okay, and then just one more question talking about rehabilitation. There's some questions about will there be reseeding, tree replanting? Have you determined any of that kind of stuff yet?
Yeah, so our initial BEAR report has been released. I'm not sure if it's been published yet, but it has been finalized. It does not cover the whole fire. As you guys know, we have a whole new area here that hasn't actually been able to be assessed since the snow. But there are some treatments that are going to be utilized. We really try to focus on science-based treatments. So there are some places where you might hope or expect that we're going to do things like planting, but science shows us that they may or may not be effective. So depending on the circumstances in different areas, there are definitely going to be treatments. There's going to be probably some limited planting. Most of it's going to be about trying to prepare that landscape to regenerate on its own.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Katie. And with that, we'll conclude the meeting for tonight. The next meeting will be Wednesday at 7:30. And on behalf of the Rocky Mountain Type 1 team, really appreciate all the support from the community. Thank you. Good night.